can we prove that God exists? This is a topic we'll be talking. And mostly is, scientific based, So it will be help, at least it helped me in my life. I will tell you, by this I have more faith in God, because I can feel like the challenge is, for example, Yashoda seeing in the mouth of Krishna herself looking at. Can we comprehend this really? Is it possible? How can we understand this? So by the end of this presentation, you will see that it is really possible. We can see how an amazing thing Krishna is doing it in us. And specifically, we are establishing that something called living software, or Sukshma Deha, subtle body, really exists. Okay? I can help you that you can feel yourself. Once you do that, once we establish that, then you are on the way. Anybody. Then we also establish Atma, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. And then based on the Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaneti, Shabdati. I will be a little faster because tomorrow we'll have more time. We can keep up with it. Because 1 hour, right? But still, I'll be a little faster. Any questions later on? Acha. 7:30. 7:30, okay. Okay, very good. Thank you. Now, in this one, and also the consequences of this learning, understanding is that how the health, see, we have so many problems, psychosomatic disease, how we can deal with this, how in a harmonious way. That will come out of this presentation. Let us talk about the protein, DNA, flower power. These are all, what we are saying is, if you look at nature, there is always a cycle. There is a cycle. Example, of course, within human, we know there is a circadian rhythm, running about 24 hours. Then is entrainable. And then this also temperature compensation is there. Then the example I'm giving you here is, look at this, if you take the silkworm, the egg, it starts with the egg, and then it starts small, small entity. Then it goes through like 4 stages of what you call fever. In other words, it sheds the skin so that it becomes bigger. And then eventually the cocoon forms, and then the adult, this moth comes out and it mates, and then again the eggs, and then see, always cycle, right? And you notice that when it is becoming bigger and bigger, and it changes even the form here, see? So what is being changing here? The body is continuously changing. But the software, Sukshma Deha, living software, see, we are saying it's a living software and a synthetic software, okay? Whatever human is making, suppose many of you are software engineers, what you are making is a synthetic software, not the living software. And here, this living software, building the living hardware, that's the difference. Okay, it is guiding. Imagine this small little egg comes out the living entity. So it is building it. This guy has a brain. Okay, there is no brain here. Okay, it builds the brain. What is that building that brain? That is the living software building it, and builds the hardware under an interface, and then see various transformation. So the software is not changing here. The hardware is being continuously changing. So that's kind of thing. Then laws of matter, Pauli exclusive principle is there. Now, why the Pauli exclusive principle? Because for the stability. stability is there. And now we do not see the operator nor the invisible. Law or the operator. We don't see the law, right? Pauli exclusive principle, they say we don't say how we recognize that law. And then we don't see the operator in this one. And then we say this is a periodical table, but in this one, the thing missing is the mind, intelligence, the subtle things. Linking these elements, that is what is missing. And look at because we'll be talking more about the human cell, I'm just giving a glimpse. This one is a human cell and it's a couple of micrometers, If you look at this, see, the human is somewhere here, human cell is somewhere in this 10 micrometer. And then we'll be looking at the proteins. Virus is here, proteins about 1 to 10 nanometer. And then molecules are in this range, 0.1. And you look at this, the science has a big problem, this one. See, this is a nascent protein. And when the protein takes called folding, it comes up with a complex three-dimensional shape. Each protein has a unique shape, and that shape what makes is functioning. Now there are all kinds of proteins. Human has not yet made any protein, because he does not understand the process. This process from his end, and the ribosome makes the protein, and how it takes on this shape. It is really, they have no idea, because it's very complex. Now, for example, I've given you in this one, it's about 1 minute. Sound is not there.
For most proteins, the polypeptide then. The life cycle of a typical protein begins with its synthesis on a ribosome. As the polypeptide chain grows, molecules of the chaperone protein bind along its length.
Yes.
The life cycle of a typical protein begins with its synthesis on a ribosome. As the polypeptide chain grows, molecules of a chaperone protein bind along its length. This prevents misfolding of the nascent polypeptide. ATP binding causes chaperone release. For most proteins, the polypeptide then folds into a native conformation. However, for some proteins, like actin, an additional folding step occurs. The unfolded polypeptide is bound in a large chaperonin protein. Within the chaperonin, the polypeptide folds and is expelled from the complex. This requires ATP. Newly liberated actin is then able to polymerize into a filament, which becomes part of the actin cytoskeleton. The lifespan of a protein is determined by the amino acid at its end terminus, or by the presence of a destruction sequence, such as PEST. Protein degradation begins when ubiquitin is covalently attached to the target protein by a conjugating enzyme. Multiple rounds of this reaction modifies the protein with a ubiquitin chain. This chain targets the protein for the 26S proteasome, the major protein degradation machine in the cytoplasm. The proteasome cleaves the tagged protein into ubiquitin and short peptides.
Now, see, this is actually the protein formation inside 10 micrometer cell, And these things are automatically happening. It's amazing. You can see a small video later on. And there is something called a Levinthal paradox. You see, for example, if you assume there's 100 amino acids and then 3 possible configurations, for the protein folding, then it comes to almost 3 to the power 100, and that turns out to be, if you imagine even cycle, 10 to the power 13 cycles per operation, this would takes 10 to the power 27 years in the fastest supercomputers. Whereas in practice it's less than 1 second. How it will take us to figure out 10 to the power 27, even beyond the age of the universe, how done in 1 second, and that too there are 90, suppose imagine there is a protein which has about 100 amino acids, and then imagine for the protein to take the shape, because the folding, you have to go through the minimal energy. Imagine it has only 3 possibilities. Actually there are many more, just an example. So then the number of calculations you have to make is 3 to the power of 100, the total. When the nascent protein comes up, to take that thing, you have to go through. So if you assume even 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 13 minus 13 seconds per operation, see it is 5 into 10 to the power of 47 operation, this time takes you to the 10 to the power of 27 years. To do all this, just one protein. Many proteins are even thousands of amino acids. Whereas in practice, in the cell, it takes less than a second. Now, how it is taking less than a second with what kind of, So that is a big challenge, So that's why he called it it's a paradox. We know, we cannot understand, it takes us this many years, whereas it happens in less than a second, so it's a paradox. So we have a solution to that. So solution is that if you take in a 3 dimension, this is what I'm saying is, if you compute, like for example, 300 nucleic acid, 2 choices, it is 2 to the power 300, 10 to the power 90. In this kind of operation, 2 to the power 6.67, 6.67. Then if you process 267 in each dimension simultaneously, at 2 to the power 9 operation, then it will take only 0.3 seconds, which is practical. So that means we are showing that it has to operate in a space independent, space independent. So that's what it will come out later on, you will see. So now these are all, the Madhvacharya has established certain things like Upadana Nimitta Karana, for any actions. We need to, and then the birth, existence, death and dependency. These are the 4 characteristics of Jada, non-living entity. And then Janma Mrityu, then the Jnana Ajnana Bandha Moksha, right? Ignorance, liberation, conditioning, knowledge, ignorance. These are for the living entity. There's 4 for the Jada. And then one who is cause of creation of unlimited insentient possessing 4 characteristics, this lemma, 2, and then 3, for all these entities, that is super soul. That is the thing. Now I will show you the mathematics, how, this is what Ramanujam says, an equation for me has no meaning unless represent thought, and then for a 0 divided by 0, he says. Now the numbers, to give an example that there is software in the so-called operations, 1, 2, 3 is operators and plus minus is like a software, okay, the operators, and then both have to come from the infinity, that's the thing. Okay. Now, there is some uniqueness, man-made, and then nature, and then time, validity, stability and control, Vedic perspective. Now man-made, for example, MAC address is there, IP, Social Security, PNR, phone. What I'm saying is, we will not find two vehicles having the same registration number, do we? If we will have a problem. Like that, two houses having same address, we will not. So this is we make these things for accountability, for us. So in the same way, in the nature, if you look at the fingerprint, right? Snowflake, the leaves, Irish, DNA, even these are all unique. I think most of you understand that, Then memory required. What I'm saying is there is a relationship between the consciousness, the memory and the uniqueness. That's why I'm talking each one. And where in this memory, there is a memory paradox. Now we calculated the memory, like, I'll give you an example. Do you have a mobile or something? Yeah, okay. See, for example, I cannot speak on this. So what I'm saying is, we have, see, this mobile is there, right? You can see. Let us say or do one small project. Suppose what I want to do is I want to going to pick up this object by a robot, and then hand it over to the another robot, right? Now to pick up this, the robot has a little hand, and it has a camera, and then someone is directing it, right? Right? You understand? Then he picks up, one robot is picking up, right? And that handing over to the another robot which has the hand, and then another camera to it, right? Like this, right? And once it picks up, one leaves, right? See, to do this, if you are an engineer, it takes a lot of effort, lot of software and coordination. Once it picks up, one leaves, right? Right? You need two cameras and guidance. Now, I don't even look at it, you see. I don't even look at it. Any of you can do it. See here. So what I'm saying? Now, I'm not even looking at it. Now, how it is being done? See what I'm saying? So, there is equivalently so much software is already in us. Understand? Uniqueness of the sound. We also have a uniqueness of sound, So, with that, we come to this huge memory. How much that memory is? It is about 25 tons of semiconductor, equivalent to whole human brain. Must be somewhere in the body, human body. Now, this is, how much it will be? This is equivalent to all the servers, mainframe, desktop, power, all the computers in this country with all the memory, pen drives, everything including this country will not come to, our estimate is like 100 billion terabyte. One man, one person. Now the question is, you can understand, no one can deny this much memory, equivalent memory is needed. Now, the weight of that memory will be hundreds, lakhs of tons. What is the weight of the human body? And that too, it will only in the brain, 3 pounds, 90% water, 150 grams. So per gram it comes to about 1 lakh terabyte per gram. So which is beyond even nanotechnology and all that. Now where is that memory? And also, as the memory goes up, the speed, clock speed also goes up. You can look at our history, right? We were talking megahertz, now, gigahertz. So this, if we calculate equivalent clock speed, it will go roof of this temple. So it's a paradox. Now where it can be? It has to be outside the brain. There is no way. You cannot deny the amount of memory needed. But it is not possible in this brain, so it has to be outside. That's why we are saying that is the proof for the Sukshma Deha, living software. That is plus the other thing. Now, so we are calling this a Pradyumna memory packing paradox. This has to reside outside. There is no other way around. Now, consciousness, levels of consciousness, evolution of natural memory, relationship up to memory and uniqueness. And so, the Brahman cannot be non-differentiated. See, this is because the Mayavadis get into this. Unless we understand this pakka, we will be in difficulty, So they say it is non-differentiated. But the non-differentiated existence cannot be proved, because we just proved that everything is unique. There are no two identical electrons within the creation, actually. In Pauli exclusive principle, it says, no, there are no two identical electrons within an atom. There are no two identical atoms. Because at least two atoms, worst case, cannot occupy the same position. So at least the position is different. So then where is two identical things? So then how can you say you can find a non-differentiated object? Understand? So that's thrown out. Then perception does not reveal merely existence. They say, perception existence. Then consciousness existence cannot be one. Then consciousness is not always self-luminous, and therefore is not self-ruled. Consciousness is not eternal and one. Self is not pure consciousness, but the knower. But the knower, this is important. It's essential consciousness, and it has also as an attribute. Then the knower is not a product of ignorance. The I, knower, persists even in deep sleep and release. The individual soul is a part of Brahman. Absolute truth is Krishna, also non-dual existence. Three aspects. And this is what we are proving to this. Now the level of 5 levels. I think most of you are familiar, consciousness. So I will not go into this. And, no. Otherwise it will not be. So anyway, it is there. See, the corresponding, the yoga, they call about the Annamaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya, Manomaya, Pranamaya, Anandam. So this, we can link it to those 5 levels of consciousness. The Achadita, Sankujita, Mukulita. The examples given here, the Achadita is like stones and trees. They have consciousness. We have Gurudev speaks in Jaiva Dharma. Beast, bird, these are all Pranamaya Kusha, Sankuchita, Mukulita, Vikasita, Purna Vikasita. It's a consciousness. Now, in other words, it's like suppose you build an object. In the software, you have a lower level, higher, middle, and super. It's like that. The living entity is having this kind of software. Then the example is manifesting livings in protein fold, pillar taxi, PR paradox, baby develop languages, migration about technology, bad, extraordinary, and deep. Practically, we can say all, and we can explain all unexplainables from this model. Okay, this is what it is. All. Nothing is left out. That's why this model. Like, for example, if you take a mRNA, what it is we have like in the previous slide I was showing you, in the nucleus there is a DNA, right? What it does is it makes a copy, and then that copy comes out into the cytoplasm, and from there like this. See, any computer, everybody knows there is a hard disk, right? Hard disk where the program resides. And then when you start using the word, for example, a copy of that is made into the RAM, and there you work on it. And it gets messed up, then anyway, when you power down, anyway, it's gone. But the hardware, in the hard disk, that is not touched. Okay? Same way, the DNA is not touched in the nucleus, but when a copy is made in the mRNA, and that's what being touched. And now, if you I have a video, but I will show you the real video. Maybe we'll move into that, I think. See, in this one, this shows what is happening inside a cell.
And see the paths that the cell manufactures, these little walking machines, they're called kinesins, that take these huge loads that would challenge an ant in relative size. You run the movie, please. But these machines that power the inside of the cells are really quite amazing, and they really are the basis of all life, but because all of these machines interact with each other, they pass information to each other, they cause different things to happen inside the cell, and the cell will actually manufacture the parts that it needs on the fly from information that's brought from the nucleus by molecules that read the genes. And no life, from the smallest life to everybody here, would be possible without these little micro machines. In fact, it would really, in the absence of these machines, have made the attendance here, Chris, really quite sparse.
These are actually happening inside a cell. So fast, amazing. Look at this.
This is the FedEx delivery guy of the cell. This little guy is called a kinesin, and he pulls a sack that's full of brand new manufactured proteins to wherever it's needed in the cell, whether it's to a membrane, whether it's to an organelle, whether it's to build something or repair something. And each of us has about 100,000 of these things running around right now inside each one of your 100 trillion cells. So no matter how lazy you feel, you're not really intrinsically doing nothing. So what I want you to do when you go home is think about this and think about how powerful our cells are, and think about some of the things that we're learning about cellular mechanics. And once we figure out all that's going on, and believe me, we know almost 1% of what's going on. Once we figure out what's going on, we're really going to be able to have a lot of control over what we do with our health, with what we do with future generations, how long we're going to live, and hopefully we'll be able to use this to discover more truth and more beauty.
Now, see, that is, we saw is a video of inside a cell, maybe 10 micrometer, very small. You know, somehow they developed capturing. Now imagine we were able to see that because of the light. Now in our body, is there any light inside? We have 10, about 100 billion, 100 trillion cells are there. 100 trillion cells. And each one is in basically darkness. But how come all these things are going on? You see? So you can imagine that. But all are harmonious. So what is that field? Even for example here, see, this is the stages. Okay. So in this case, you see the scale is already there. It's about 5 millimeter, right? 5 millimeter. You get the idea. The stages of the baby forming. Now look at the symmetry also. The baby doesn't have one leg bigger, one is smaller. Now who is telling, it should be, like that. And in this case, there are about 250,000 neurons being manufactured every minute. We'll come to that, So it's an amazing thing. What it is at this stage, this fetus doesn't have the connection from the mother, and it is building its own brain. Understand? So who it is building? So the software, the Sukshma Deha is building it. And for example, you can see in this one, how from the conception, this is
after fertilization, the fertilized fertilized egg, or zygote, begins dividing. By about 4 days after fertilization, a solid ball of cells called a morula forms. The cells continue to multiply, and by day 5, the cells separate into 2 groups, the inner cell mass, which will become the embryo, and an encompassing sac called the trophoblast, which will develop into the placenta. Trophoblast cells secrete fluid, creating a cavity, the blastocele, with the inner cell mass at one end. At this stage, the mammalian embryo is called a blastocyst. The cells of the inner cell mass eventually form 2 layers, the epiblast and the hypoblast. The epiblast is thought to contain the cells that will generate the actual embryo. Critical to the early development of all vertebrate embryos is the process of gastrulation, which occurs between days 13 and 19. Gastrulation results from the movement of cells toward the midline and then forward along the midline, forming a groove called the primitive streak. The end result is the production of the 3 primitive cell layers, the endoderm, the mesoderm, and the ectoderm. The nervous system develops from the outer layer, called the ectoderm. As this cell layer thickens, it becomes a distinct epithelium called the neural plate. Uneven rates of cell division form a groove called the neural groove that will become the midline of the embryo. Ridges of ectoderm continue to bulge on both sides of the midline. The tops of the neural ridges eventually come together, forming the neural tube. The interior of the neural tube becomes the fluid-filled cerebral ventricles of the brain, the central canal of the spinal cord, and the passages that connect them. By about 24 days, the 3 major subdivisions of the brain are discernible. These include the prosencephalon, or forebrain, including the telencephalon and diencephalon, the mesencephalon, or midbrain, and the rhombencephalon, or hindbrain. The progenitor cells of the neural tube are known as neural precursor cells, or neural stem cells. This represents the first stage of neural development, neurogenesis, when undifferentiated cells undergo mitotic divisions to produce either new stem cells or neuroblasts that will eventually differentiate into neurons. The cells undergo a stereotyped pattern of cell movements as they progress through the mitotic cycle. Eventually, the dividing precursor cells form a closely packed layer of cells called the ventricular zone. Eventually, some cells leave the ventricular zone, forming a second layer of cells called the marginal zone. Later, an intermediate layer develops as the wall thickens. Cells in the intermediate zone will then begin to differentiate into both neurons and glia. As the number of cells increases during the period of neurogenesis, the newly formed cells must move even greater distances. The massive movement of nerve cells to establish distinctive cell populations represents the second stage of neural development, cell migration. Cells do not move in an aimless, haphazard manner. Cells in the developing cortex move along the surface of a particular type of glial cell called radial glia. Like spokes of a wheel, these radial glia cells extend from the inner to the outer surfaces of the emerging nervous system. The radial glial cells act as guide wires, and the newly formed cells creep along their processes. Once cells reach their appropriate destination, the third stage of neural development begins, differentiation. At this point, the cells begin to use or express particular genes. This allows the cell to acquire the distinctive appearance and functions of neurons characteristic of that particular region. As the process of differentiation proceeds, the fourth stage of neural development begins, process outgrowth. The biggest change in brain cells early in life is the extensive growth of axons and dendrites and the proliferation of synapses. The neural environment also greatly influences nerve cell differentiation. In vertebrates, young neural cells seem to have the capacity to become many varieties of neurons, and the particular type of neuron that a cell becomes depends on where it happens to be and what its neighboring cells are.
See, I don't know you understood this or not, but what it is in the mother's womb there are about 100 billion neurons by the time the baby is born, okay, 9 months. And then in the early stage, 250,000 neurons being produced per minute. Imagine, 2.5 lakhs. And they all have to be arranged. It's like imagine in a computer, right? Resistors, capacitors, ICs and all that, right? You have the components. Components are being manufactured and you have to put them and you have to connect them, see? So the neurons are being different kinds, Earlier, later on, they take on their different activity and they get connected. And you think without any diagram they get connected? And it is dark inside, right? There is no light there. How it is being connected, in that, that's what we are talking. That's why the Sukshma Deha is essential. Sukshma Deha, which does not, this Sukshma Deha doesn't need the light of this, okay? It doesn't need this mundane light. It actually is also like a space, like later on we will see, it doesn't need. That's why Krishna says, there is no light of moon or sun or the stars or even the vidyut. It is a different kind of light. So Sukshma Deha, it sees, actually it is space independent. You understand? It is space independent. It does not depend on this light and it is controlling. We have 100 billion, 100 trillion cells, 90 trillion cells are all being controlled at the same time. I don't know how many people can appreciate this. Jai Jai Sri Radha, Jai Jai Radha Ramana. That's now also all the signal to do our activity does not come from the brain. Then where it should be coming? That's the example I'm giving. Next one, couple of them. You can see, for example, this one, I will skip it just to get an idea. You can think of so many activities like this, dancing and all that, all those movements, our eye movement does not coming from the brain. That's what I'm saying. See, these fast movements, coordination, it cannot be coming from the brain. Okay, we can show by calculation. So where it is coming from? It has to be from the Sukshma Deha. That's why we say, for example, this is an amazing thing. We say, by heart. Do we say, by brain? So like that, the heart is the actual the location of the Sukshma Deha. Atma Paramatma is there like that. Now, see, in the 1828, there was one comment was, all embryos, fish, amphibious, reptile, birds, are almost identical to the first developments, zygote, blastula, gastrula. Only later on, special characteristics of the class, order, family, gender, species, successive appear. Now, ask a question. Wait a minute. In the beginning, they look same, no matter what is the source, but what is the difference? You see, what is the difference? What is it guiding to become a human? What is guiding to become a fish? Don't you think there's something? So that is the Sukshma Deha. That is Sukshma Deha. Now, of course, the language. Language is another thing. How we develop, like multiple languages. Babies start learning. How is it? Original language. Plants and creation. Saptama Mukhya, there in the seventh creation, see the Brahma, Lord creates the 6 stages of creation, right? And from the 7th to 10th, Brahma creates. In this one, We call it as pelotaxy. For example, see the leaf here. See there are different stages of leaf. See how uniform it is? And then his position and that position is different. See, it is rotating gradually. So if you look at from the center, see how nicely it is arranged there, so that the sunlight can uniformly, and also the rain, when it rains, it falls like that, See, look at the organ, the arrangement. Don't you see any pattern there? Look at this. And also even the teeth, for example, even these ratios, different ratios within a butterfly. What we call the golden ratio, the face, the uniqueness. Now look at this complex leaf. See, this is one leaf, you see? And it's amazing. Now, who is telling, hey, wait a minute, I have to do here, I have to do here. And it is, so in other words, this plant also has a Sukshma Deha telling it. Now, Sukshma Deha, this plant, for example, starts from a tiny seed, right? It grows up. What I'm trying to say is, like this golden ratio is actually 1 plus 1 by 1 plus 1, the reciprocal. There's a phi also like that, See, look at this. It is formation. Then what I was trying to say is, see, this tree started with a small tree. Now it become big. How many? Lakhs and lakhs of leaves are there. Now those lakhs and lakhs of leaves are all symmetrical. They are all small, small, small. Who is guiding it? So it should be the Sukshma Deha, and Sukshma Deha is not becoming from the small to the big. You see, that is the paradox. Sukshma Deha must be independent of the space. It is accessing all the leaves same time. You understand? And it doesn't need light to see them. And this thing will not come in the way of looking for, for the Sukshma Deha. You understand? These trees, the branches and all that does not come in the way of observation. So that's why it is beyond the space, beyond the space and the light. That's how Krishna is controlling us. He has put a Sukshma Deha, living software, so that he can actually control all these cells, And that's how it's in the foreground and the background. In the background, when we grow up, he gives he builds an interface, like in the brain we are talking about. The human brain, the baby fetus, he building the interface, and then he hands over certain functions to us. And he stays always in the background and controlling. And we, like for example, we take prasadam, we put it into the tongue, right? Right? After putting on the tongue, we feel, oh, it's salty, it's sweet and all. After that, do we have any control over that? What happens? How it gets digested? How it has, control. So actually there are 3 aspects to it, One becomes, comes out as a malamutra. The middle part goes to become blood, bones and all that. The third part, actually most essential, the subtle part, goes to our mind, the word we speak, and then the prana. That's why we have to, maybe tomorrow I'll get into that, more detail. The aspects of it. So now the technology of bats, okay, this really blows them out. The bat can determine where the object is, how big it is, in what direction moving. Bat can tell. These are an amazing thing. They are telling that it is beyond the brain capacity of the brain of the bats to do this. They themselves are saying. So who it is doing? It is the software. You can see this is an amazing video. It's only 1 minute.
Millions of creatures live in perpetual darkness. Every night, they leave in hordes in search of food.
They go very, very high.
they quickly disappear from the view of the naked eye, and if you take binoculars, they quickly disappear from the view of the binoculars. And one of the real obvious questions that presents itself to you as you watch this is, why are they going up there? What's up there for them? Why are they going to such high altitudes?
These are Mexican free-tail bats. In the winter months, the bats live near Mexico City. But early each summer, over 100 million of them migrate to large caves in South Texas. The largest of the caves is Bracken, home to 20 million bats.
They're all staying here.
The walls of Bracken Cave squirm and breathe.
These are all babies.
In mid-June, the female bats give birth. And the population of Bracken Cave temporarily doubles to approximately 40 million.
Now, how they can find?
To improve its machine sonar, the Navy is turning to animals that use sonar naturally. James Simmons studies the extraordinary ability of bats to see with sound.
What we're interested in is how the bat uses sonar to see objects in space.
Bats can navigate around obstacles at night, chase and catch insects, even when they are near objects of a similar shape.
There are some kinds of bats that will actually fly into the vegetation, searching for insects, and can find them in the presence of this enormous background of echoes from the branches and the leaves. They treat this as easy.
See this one?
The bat's sonar is at such a high frequency that humans cannot hear it. This bat detector lowers the frequency so the bat's sounds become audible.
Look at
Each time the bat makes one of these sounds, it moves the ears in this back and forth pattern, scanning. Our experience tells us what the bat does is impossible, and yet the bats fly around and do this all the time.
By studying the extraordinary ability of animals, we learn ways to improve our own inventions.
What it shows is, it's funny, it's how they are telling. They do not understand because it is so fast, the processing is amazing, So it has to be outside the brain, Now, another example here, in the ants, there are two of them. You can see it becomes very obvious in this one. Now, this is talking, this ant, you see this is 1 millimeter, this scale is, so tiny, a couple of millimeter bug is talking about, it has a gears in it,
Gears in an insect. Mechanically interacting gears are always thought of as a man-made invention used in our bikes and our cars. But what we've shown is that a small plant-sucking bug evolved gears long, long ago and uses these gears to mechanically synchronize the very rapid jumping movements of its legs. This is the first demonstration of interacting gears being used by any animal.
2 legs.
The jump is really very rapid indeed. It takes off at a velocity of about 5 meters per second. That's equivalent to about 12 miles per hour. And it accelerates in less than a millisecond. So it experiences enormous G-forces as it takes off, about 500 or even 700 G. I first became aware of these bugs when I was in the garden of my friend and colleague Peter Braunig in Aachen in Germany. He has a quite wild garden with lots of ivy growing all over the place. They're a very specific sort of bug. They only like to eat ivy. And so I spent a huge amount of time trying to look on all the ivy bushes in Cambridge for these bugs and couldn't find them. Then my 5-year-old grandson, Max, came to the rescue. He found these bugs in his garden, and he rushed up to me one day and said, "Grandad, I found these plant hoppers in my garden. Here they are." And so we brought them back to the lab here in Cambridge, and that's when I did the experiment of showing that the cogwheels were actually engaging with each other. The high-speed images that we have to take of these bugs to reveal these very brief events takes us into a completely different world. Two artists in London.
See, what he's saying is, this is Cambridge done, it's a tiny bug and it has a built-in gears, as you saw, you know. Why? Because when in the airport, right, when the flight takes off, imagine if the two tires are a little different. One leaves earlier compared to the other, what will happen? The plane will go off like this, right? So same thing. In this case, that bug's tiny bug, that's why it has that gears. Now why it has gear? Because the brain, the signal cannot, it is so fast, he's talking about 1 millisecond, the brain signal cannot come that fast, This is their conclusion. So that's from where it is coming, if it is not from the brain. So like that. And in this one, to show that the Paramatma, you can look at this. This is ants, how they're building a bridge in the Amazon. It's an amazing thing, you can see.
Creatures that were once living on the forest floor now need to find other ways of getting around during the flood. The busy life of a fire ant colony has to carry on regardless.
See, they are building a boat. Ants are.
By linking legs, the worker ants create a living raft, supported by the surface tension of the water. Free now to move through the forest, these vicious stingers make the most of the flood. They use it to spread to other parts of the Amazon. On this lifeboat, the queen and her young need to be kept safe and dry.
How harmoniously they are working.
But there's no getting away from hungry fish. Once in the open river, they are at the mercy of the current and unpredictable waves. If they are lucky enough to hit land, the soggy ants disentangle and disembark, unloading the family as they go. After a little toweling off, the worker ants soldier on, carefully guiding their queen to safety.
This raises a lot of questions. You can see the boat was actually all the ants, right? And how these shape and the coordination, and it's an amazing thing. It has to be something like within our own body. We have 90 trillion cells. Here, maybe 1 million, these ants. How they are coordinating. So that shows that the Paramatma must be guiding. Otherwise, coordination, Now, in contrast to this, you can see the Harvard University built a small bug, small bee, Robo-bee, they call it Robo-bee. How difficult it is when we try to duplicate it, you know.
Robo-bees is the smallest flying robot ever built. It's the size of a postage stamp and weighs about as much as a small snowflake. Its wings, which beat 120 times per second, are thinner than human hair. Power and flight control commands are transmitted from a computer to the Robo-bee via tether. But Mike Smith from Harvard University's Micro-Robotics Lab hopes to design an autonomous version, a Robo-bee that can fly on its own, even though the technology needed does not yet exist.
We still have yet to bring on board sensing, some computational intelligence, a brain, if you will. And then one of the big ones, of course, is power. And so these are some of the challenges that we're looking downstream at.
Smith says it will take 10 years before the technology has been miniaturized to the scale needed to make free-flying Robo-bees functional. But he says the researchers are making strides in other areas, such as mass production. The engineers can now print and assemble hundreds of Robo-bees at the same time by applying the same pop-up design principles as those used in a child's storybook. The researchers print plates that can be aligned and popped into place to form a completed robot.
And the idea is that we have on the Robo-bee 137 of these linkages. And so as you separate these plates one from the other, these linkages, just like the children's pop-up book, force this Robo-bee into position.
And once in position, Smith sees a day when teams of Robo-bees can be deployed to replicate the behavior of their biological cousins.
Any one bee might know a little about his surroundings, perhaps what's sort of right in the general area, but you would utilize a sort of a colony mentality to sort of pass the word, if you will. You could envision perhaps a Robo-bee that has found something, maybe dropping down and expending the rest of its battery, acting like a beacon, or perhaps going back to the hive and then passing back and forth the information through a more of a centralized intelligence.
Intelligence that can be used in search and rescue missions or military surveillance. Smith says Robo-bee swarms can even be deployed to pollinate crops and flowers, a futuristic vision of a technology inspired by nature.
Now, the Bhagavatam, 11th canto, talks about a lot of mystic that we have perfection. There are actually 27 of them. Now, one of them is smaller than the smallest. Now, single cell size, 100 nanometer, and now to what extent, right? This is a perfection, what extent the human endowed with, and what kind of technology we are trying to replace. And then, nanotechnology, greater than the greatest, banyan tree. Now, what we try to get over is through the bridges, acquire whatever one desires, only upon some experience, like that. Like Dura Shravana, Dura Darshana, Agnistamba, Jalastamba, these are the siddhis we are talking. Seeing, for example, things far away. Birds have better eyesight. Telescope, television, satellite, we are trying to actually, if you look at the whole thing, we are trying to mimic or get over with these Pancha Mahabhutas, because we have no access to the mind. We do not have. So we are trying to, same way we can synthesize synthetic software, but not the living software. We do not have access. That's why what we made is God made the conductor and an insulator. We kind of put the dopants and made it in a semiconductor, right? And then we created a capacitance 0 and 1, and that's how we built up the synthetic software, So if you look at that, this is that kind of a thing, Then, for example, remain unconquered by others. What we do is we duplicity, bodybuilding, defense, alarm systems. So, but that's all we can go. But you can see there's a better way. Once we realize this Sukshma Deha, how we can be actually get over with these, a misdirected way, even the health-wise and all that. Now this is to get an idea of the independent living software, because within a cell, how these the proteins are being done. You can see the how the harmony is there within a cell. These little things, ribosomes.
Transported from the nucleus to the cytoplasm, ribosomes begin to translate the sequence into amino acids. Typically, many ribosomes translate the mRNA simultaneously. Each ribosome begins at the 5' end of the mRNA and progresses steadily towards the 3' end. New ribosomes attach to the 5' end at the same rate as the previous ones move out of the way. These multiple initiations allow the cell to make much more protein from a single message than if one ribosome had to complete the task before another could begin. When a ribosome reaches a stop codon, the ribosome and the new protein dissociate from each other and from the mRNA. This electron micrograph depicts a membrane-bound polyribosome from a eukaryotic cell.
See, this is 100 nanometer, right? Very tiny, we cannot even see, and those things are happening, and they don't collide each other, and there is no light inside the cell. There is no light to see each other. How they are doing it? See, understand? And there is so much harmony, and this is one cell, and there are 100 trillion cells in our own one body. So that's why the Sukshma Deha is so powerful. I will tell you, very powerful. So within this body, see, we can access, right? That's why Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, right? This kshetrajna, right? And then of course Krishna has control over all other kshetra. So this becomes very, very clear from this. Then now how do we explain the evolution kind of thing? Because when we deal with this so-called professor or whatever, we have to be able to explain them. Look, how we are being misguided by the Darwin, so far. But is there any solution? I will tell you there is. In this one, this is a long one. I will make it a short thing, just to get it.
Conduct an experiment in which you can test whether evolution will occur in a population of fruit flies. You will test these flies for how long they can go without food before they die, a measure called starvation resistance. In biology, the term population has a specific meaning. It is a group of organisms of the same species living in a particular geographic region. In this case, a cage in your laboratory. How do you measure starvation resistance? In this experiment, you start the clock at the time you remove the food, but not water, from the cage. Fruit flies have tiny bodies that don't hold very large caloric reserves. After a relatively short time, they begin to die. Using a graph, you can look at the number of flies compared to how many hours they survived before starvation. From this preliminary study, you observe that the average starvation resistance in this population is 20 hours. This marks your first step in using the scientific method, observation. Now you come up with the hypothesis that fruit flies can indeed be selected to have a greater resistance to starvation. This means that you're testing whether the population can evolve from one generation to the next. Your prediction is that if the population undergoes selection for starvation resistance, subsequent generations of fruit flies can exceed an average 20 hours of starvation resistance. To conduct the experiment, you begin with a large number of flies in the cage. The population is actually much larger than depicted here, with each fly representing 500 individuals. Therefore, the population consists of about 5,000 flies. As before, you begin by removing the food. Note that the flies in this experiment are highly variable in their traits for starvation resistance, and that these variations exist even before our experiment begins. The experiment simply allows us to identify which of these flies have the traits for the strongest starvation resistance. After 80% of the flies have died, you save the remaining 20% by adding food back to the cage. In this way, you've selected only the most starvation-resistant fruit flies. On average, this first generation has a starvation resistance of 20 hours. Will the next generation be able to go longer without food? Recall that these 2 remaining flies actually represent 1,000 flies from the population, and that this population still retains a lot of variability for starvation resistance. After the surviving flies eat, they'll have the energy to reproduce. The females will...
What we are saying is, because the long one, what is missing here is, see, for example, like they go up to the almost 160 hours. In other words, they were small and they become big, caloric, So they say it is because of the gene modification. What is missing in their argument is, we know, suppose when suppose we are put into that situation, starvation, what happens? We feel pain about it. Hey, unnecessarily food was taken out, So the Sukshma Deha, if the hardware goes, right, the Sukshma Deha is there. So that is reborn into these next situation. See? The reborn. So that's how that duration is becoming longer and longer. That's what is missing. That's what is missing. And also the desire of the the parent. So because the transmission from the one species, one generation to the another is through the eggs. You saw that, right? But what is missing is this software part of it. That's what they are not finding it out. So what we are saying is, true, they got this trait, what you call this starvation trait, through the software, not through the hardware. For example, in this case, if you take the vacuum tubes, they were big, right? And later on transistors, VLSI, now we have the small one, right? Now, behind this is the living software, right? The idea, right? And then that got into the hardware chain, and then that we got into a longer battery life, right? Yeah. So same way here also, living software got into the genes and then longer duration. See? So this part they are missing in the evolution. So if you bring that back, then because they are also saying, there is a commonality. All the things came from the Kashyapa. We have a better story. Actually, complete story. Kashyapa, how with the different wives he was able to get even the trees, the birds and all that. Then the dog, is an amazing thing. How they can do such an amazing thing without the software, Now, for example, the blind people, what they have is how they read. See, you are blind, right? But only with the senses. Able to touch and then read the thing. That is 2 dots and then 3. 2 dots here, 3 dots there. Like these ASCII codes. It's like 64 things are there. So don't you think that transformation is done by the genes? It's like in the computer you have a similar thing, right? Transformation going on. So different code in the Braille character. That has to have a software. This is what I'm saying. Now, and the difference between living and synthetic software, reproduce, copy DNA, so many things, minimal. But the main thing is like a space dependency, The living software has none, But here, synthetic software, we network of servers, satellites, we try to come out with it. Then living software exists. Now how do you say? Space independent. We have shown so many examples, okay? Space independent, there's the only way. Then it directs the building living hardware. We saw that. And then adapts to the environment. And then does not get destroyed when living hardware is destroyed. Coordinates and collaborates. And then also there's a couple of things I did not put it, it doesn't need light. And also it is self-aware. What do you mean by self-aware? If you look at that in our own case, suppose I scratch, I don't, I know that I'm saying. If somebody does scratch, I know somebody else, right? Tickling, for example. We don't get tickled by ourselves, do we? Then, so how does, see, the awareness is there, self-awareness. So that is the thing. Suppose you build like a sensor, like a door entry or that. Does it know, can you able to distinguish whether it is, wait a minute, the owner is coming. Unless you build what you call a synthetic awareness. What we are trying to do with elaborate, maybe you can do with a, recognition and all that. Synthetic, but not the living awareness. Those are the things we're saying. Now, relations and healing. Now, how we can use this? Hardware byte and a software byte. Healing defound, in fact, spontaneous sambandha vidya prayana. Now, I'll give an example. There's still time, Yeah. There's time is over, or is it 15 minutes? Like what I'm telling is hardware and a software byte. I'll come to that later on, because then the chitta and buddhi, how this, you see this ahankara in the mode of goodness gives the mind. Passion in the indriyas and the in the ignorance is the panchamahabhuta panchatanmata. See how the mind has control over the panchamahabhuta, because from the sattvic, that's how there. And then in this one you can see what is happening is, see, this is a one circle, right? This is another circle. Now if you move individually, because 2 pi r, it should end up only here, right? And this is a bigger circle, it is coming up here. But look that both are traveling to the same distance. In other words, small one also going much larger, longer. You get the idea? So it's a paradox. How is it possible? We can understand it has a lot of implications in a spiritual, in a sense. If you are connected with the Lord, we can go much longer, That's what I'm saying. And also one-to-one is mapping is there. That's why you see it goes. But if you take the individual, you should not go up to this point. You should end up here, right? So that aspect. That's why we need to be connected. We are not independent. Understand, if we, there is a thing. What else we have? Now, science and bhakti. See, bhakti starts with faith, science starts with doubt. There are laws of, very amazing laws are there. Laws of science are certain. Experience and know God, but science has no means to know Him. Subject to intermittency, like that. And then we saw the manifestations of Atma Brahman. The living software, so many examples, Atma, silkworm, bees, Brahman. Pauli EPR paradox, we did not go. The only way to explain that is that we have to bring in the Brahman all around. Otherwise, there is no way of knowing which is, the spin. One is up, one is down, like that, Paramatma, Bhagavan. And Bhagavan, of course, there is Yatova Iman. Like in Dwarka, they found this thing in the Harivamsa talks about like in the computer, like data centers, you cannot go unless we are authorized, right? Same way, Krishna gave this kind of ID to all the citizens of Dwarka, and it is described in Harivamsa, and they found one. Huh? And then this is Ram Setu. We have scripture, and then you can see the bridge here, and this is India. Huh? This is Rameshwar, like a shank. Huh? And this is entire Lanka. You see? Entire Lanka. In that scale, this bridge is visible. Huh? This is NASA picture. Taken on 94/3/12 and the 7:45 morning. 62 satellite, So it shows that the what described in the Shastra, lila took place. And then this is Kishkinda, Karnataka is there. So many other things, Narsingadev, and then we have a lot of things. Then Vede Ramane Chaiva Purane Bharata Tata Adavante Madhya Hari Sarvatra Giyate. Vedic literature include Ramayana, Purana, Mahabharata from the very beginning, middle and the end. They always glorify only Hari Sri. Similarly, we look at in a different perspective. We find only the glories of Lord Hari in all math, science, biology and everything. This is good. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So any questions? We have some time. Yeah?
So how you describe that living software according to Krishna? Is Krishna living software is different from Christ's living software?
See, Ekameva Param Tatmam Ekam Advityam. God is one, okay? It's not two. And see, that's why even here we have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Radha Krishna. If you look at what Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati has said, our Aradhya has to be one. Understand? So for a lila they have taken like that, I don't know what you are saying here is the limitations. See, we are limited. You understand? God has put into this prison, into the limited. The space is limited. You understand? I don't know if you got the idea or not. The space is limited, right? To control that is controlling from the mind, which is made from the sattvic ahankar. That is still ahankar, understand? So we have to go obviously beyond sattvic ahankar also, right? Karana, deha, then only get to the... But we are trying to explain to the scientists, look, you have to go beyond. They are into the matter, as you are saying, right? No. The controlling this matter is from how we can control it, transcending the matter. That's why the independent of space is a different concept. And then also you don't need the light. That software does not depend on this light. It can access. That's why the mind, mind is so fast. But even faster than that, That's why how Krishna able to contain all of that, because he has a control over everything, right? Without his mercy, nothing moves. So that he has that power. That we can glimpse from this analysis, at least to me, that I have understood, okay? It is possible. How? Because the entire this universe can pop into, say, even a small, like a point. We cannot really say point, but because of lack of words. The words is limited. It's a Maya. The words, the language itself is Maya. The only we can understand and we cannot express. But what to do? We are stuck with this my language. So we try to, that's why you have to experience. Eventually it comes back to that. Our sadhana, right? That's why our sadhana has to be there. And tomorrow we can, today, anyway, you get the idea of what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. What is missing is, see, this is basically, again, same point. They are into matter. That's all they can see, right? See, one time there was a question of Sir C.V. Raman, with Bhakti Daita Madhu Maharaj. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, they wanted to bring Sir C.V. Raman. Sir C.V. Raman said, no, unless I see, can you show your God in... Then he was, Bhakti Daita Madhu Maharaj said, wait a minute, there is things outside this wall. Can you see it? No, but how do you, So he was telling, I have to build up the instrument, then they have to train up like that. So basically, the sciences, they are not seeing. That's why within themselves there is argument. See, nobody is, agreeing with their thing, There are so many things. So what we are saying is we are contributing to that. Look, there is another missing software component to it. If you bring that, understand, the story will be pakka. That's what, yeah. How
do you find it? Maybe if you can explain what is the hidden component, the Atma.
Oh, I see. See, the reason why I'm calling is, now every small boy understands, hey, wait a minute, computer is there. Computer is hardware, software, operator, network admin. Even a small boy understand, right? Can the computer work with only hardware? Everybody says no. Can it work only with the software? They say no, right? And which is strongest? Software, they say. If software is visible, suppose you install software into the computer. Before installation and after installation, you think there is a change in the weight of the computer? No. You see, those concepts they can understand. From that angle, I am calling this as a living software in opposing to synthetic software. And this living software include the mind, intelligence, ahankar, chitta, atma, paramatma. So that's, but if you present it to the scientists as all this, they get, hey, wait a minute, will get lost. But if you bring it as a living software, synthetic software, they will listen to us. Understand? They will listen to us. When they listen to that, when their awareness from the consciousness from Achadita, Sankuchita, maybe they are coming to Mukulita, then we can bring other components. Understand? So initially I will not talk about the soul, Atma and all that. But let us get to that. Wait a minute, there is a software, living software. They are telling it. You saw the bats, they are saying, yes, wait a minute. We don't understand how this working can be happening in their brain, And that Jesus fly going off, 1 millisecond. They say, the brain cannot enough to, signal. So they are talking. With these examples, we can show, hey, wait a minute, there is something. Memory calculation, you see, memory calculation. There has to be beyond this body, right? So with these examples, we can clearly establish that there is a living software. Point number one. That's the main focus, really. Because we are devotees, I am bringing the other aspect. Otherwise, from the scientific community, I don't even bring that at all. Otherwise, it's confusion. We have to bring them to that level. Understand, hey, wait a minute, as a computer, as a software, same way, this is the most complex, must have a living software. Once you bring to that point, then it all becomes very easy, And then, wait a minute, which came first? Living software or same cycle, right? In a program, you write, for example, beginning and the end. Then jump back to end, beginning, right? There's a software, that's how you read. Same thing you see, everything in this cycle. You have a mango, right? Mango tree needs a seed, and then to get the seed you need a tree. Which came first? Unless somebody puts in, like a software, engineer. So from that angle, I'm calling that, living software, But if you come up with a better word, I will be, Bhakti, like Abhideya Pravajana Sambandha. See, the way to realize actually by Gurudev's Smriti, otherwise not possible. And it's not possible. And we can see this as an implication. It is space independent. Try to understand that. It is an amazing concept. And then the light, and it has an awareness. You understand? Awareness. Now people are actually in the computer, they're trying to write some programs called self-learning software like that. These are all coming. See, there is nothing new under the sun. Krishna, imagine, try to understand. This will alone blow anybody's mind. Imagine 100 billion terabyte in our buddhi, which is no weight, right? And it is all the memory in the entire this country cannot come to one human person. That alone is enough to blow anybody's mind, if you can convince that. And that's what it is, So, yeah. Time is up. No. Mind is part of it. Right. It is an interface. The very presence of God, what it makes powerful, not without Him. It is by His very presence it is working, by His very presence. See, that's why the persistence, we didn't get the time to see. If you cut a leaf, for example, how it lives for a while. Scientists think, this. Actually, the persistence. Because the influence, the influence of the presence, like when we come near the presence of Gurudev, that persists for a long time, Its influence persists for a long time.
So basically, are you denying the theory of evolution, or you agree with it?
No, wait a minute. If you see properly, it is got vaporized already. Not what to speak of denying it. It doesn't. It's incomplete. It's incomplete and inconsistent. Okay, I can challenge you on anybody on that, because you see the Cambridge. Okay, you see the scientists of the Navy. You see not one or two. So many examples. Okay, so many examples that go against it. And what we are proposing is to make their theory complete, which comes back to the Vedic model and nothing more than that. Understand?
See, basically, what I believe is there is evolution makes sense, but God also makes sense. The reason is because the whole universe is very difficult to understand. And maybe time will come 1,000 years from now, when man has created man is able to control man. And we can control it in 1,000 years, 10,000 years. If we can do that, if we can create life and understand maybe 50% of the mystery of the universe, then
See, sorry to bother you, okay, that is not possible. You must be a fool, number one, to come to that. I will tell you why. Don't get it wrong, okay? First of all, try to understand that if you understand that living software is space independent, what do we have? Understand? To achieve that, it is not in our hand. Try to understand that. Understanding this will make us humble, humility. Okay? Try to accept bhakti. That's the only way to understand. Otherwise, it's space independent. Imagine in the brain, try to understand this. When the embryo building 250,000 neurons per minute, understand? 2.5 lakh neurons per minute. Can you imagine that in a small space? couple of square cubic meter. And who is guiding it? All the small things can be connected. Dark there. You think you can build it one? No, try to understand. Can you build your own brain? No, what progress? For example, I showed you that. They're trying to say, don't give this post-dated check. Try to realize, by the time you understand, you are aging, is it not? You are aging, is it not? All of us don't get it. No, what is life? What is continuing? No, wait a minute. After artificial insemination of what? You created those the genes there? No, you created the eggs there? You took the egg and then took it outside. What did you do? No. Say, you must be, I'm sorry. Say, I will tell you every seed as a software. Okay? You know how I will tell you? Suppose. We cannot. See, for example, this battery, once you turn off, right? No other keys works, no matter what you do, right? Unless you press that on-off button, right? When you press that on-off button, it comes back itself, right? Because in the software, all the keys are, once it is put off, all the keys are not scanned. Same way, the seed is looking for the water and the temperature. Once it comes up, it starts the process, living software in it. Understand? Now, what is the nature of that software? Can you understand that? What instruments you can use? What instrument do we have other than these Pancha Mahabhutas? That's why it is not in our hand. It is not in the purview of the human being. Don't be that's why you have to surrender. If you are intelligent, once hearing this, you will surrender. There is no other way. Can you imagine 100 billion terabyte in one's human mind, which is even not visible? Can we achieve that technology? No way. Billion, trillion years later, we will not be able to, So why waste time on that? If you are intelligent, they're like the bees, they are thriving, they are getting stuck. Wait a minute, I have to do something. So they get reincarnated, and that's how the thing comes up, So that's what is missing in the